The backhand is the most common throw in disc golf, and everybody wants to bomb the disc down the fairway, whether on an open course or a wooded course. But if we're being really honest with ourselves, very few people can actually do that. So the question today is, why is the disc golf backhand so hard to do? Hey everybody, it's Antonio and welcome to episode 1 here on Teach Play Disc Golf. I am so excited for this inaugural episode and I appreciate you so much for listening and tuning in, whether you're listening on the podcast or here on YouTube watching. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to discuss the backhand today. Now it's going to be fairly surface level. There are a lot of nuances with the backhand and this would be a really long episode if all I did was just talk about the backhand and every fine detail. So we're just going to kind of look at it surface level. In further future episodes we'll touch on more specific things, but today surface level. But I think it's going to be so helpful whether you've followed my channel for a long time or you're brand new here. I think you'll find it helpful and I'm so happy that you are here. Now I have some great things planned for today's show, and so let's go ahead and let's get into that. So we're going to talk about backhand form. I'm going to share my disc golf story, how I found disc golf, how I got into it, that kind of thing. Then we're going to review the Las Vegas challenge, and I'm super excited to share my thoughts. You might disagree or you might agree, but that's okay. We all have our own opinions, so that's totally fine. And then just some things to look forward to this season that I'm really excited about. I've been thinking about some of these. I'm really excited to see just how the season plays out. Okay, so when it comes to the backhand form, we see people, pros, local pros, just local people out on the course. We see them throw the backhand, and it's honestly the most popular throw. You see backhands more than anything else, more than forehands even. Obviously, definitely more than things like thumbers and all that kind of stuff. But it is still so difficult to get the form right, and that's because before we get into some of the finer details here on the surface level, the backhand is a full body movement and it kind of uses our body in different ways than maybe some people are used to, especially if you don't have athletic background in some different kinds of sports. So we're going to go ahead and break it down, and we're going to start from the ground up. We're going to start by talking about our feet. So the first thing is the X step. Everybody sees these pros and even amateurs doing this thing that we call the X step. And while the X step is great, if you're brand new to disc golf, I just want you to know it's not necessary. You don't have to do the X step. But the X step is basically a movement to help get your lower body to build a little bit more momentum and more power into your throw without having to necessarily exert a whole lot more effort. The X step basically requires you to crisscross your legs as you're walking by, kind of like the karaoke shuffle a little bit. If you ever played football or something growing up, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, the X step is there. It's super helpful. And basically it helps you get in a powerful throwing position to where you have your plant leg slightly out in front of you and outside of your hip. And then you have your off leg, or your trail leg as I like to call it. And that's basically going to be where you're almost like slightly pushing off of as you brace into your brace leg. So the X step is really cool, but it's not necessary. Here are two things though that are necessary. The first being that plant foot. Now, one of the things that people do more than anything else when I've coached people is they have their toes pointed outward. So if you're throwing down the fairway, your toes are actually closer to the end of the tee pad than your heel is. So that's what it means when like your toe is pointing out. This is really bad to do if you're trying to get power, because that means your hips are already open. And the thing about the backhand throw is you want your hips to be closed for as long as possible, and we'll get to that in a second. So the way you can help with that is actually not just have your foot perpendicular to the tee pad or wherever you're throwing if you're in the fairway, but actually have your toes pointed inward, just a little bit, not anything crazy like a 60 degree in, because that would just be wild and would be really difficult to throw. But if you just have a little bit, have your toes pointed in just a little bit, you want your heel to technically be closer to the end of the tee pad than your toes. That's going to close those hips off. That's the first thing. The second thing is to then, as you are throwing your backhand, is you want that back foot to actually come off the ground. And there are a few reasons that you want that to happen. The first is getting that foot off the ground means that you are fully going into your brace leg. Also with that, if you keep your foot on the ground, chances are you're going to drag your toe. And think about trying to accelerate and hit the brakes at the same time in your car. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. You obviously aren't really going to get anywhere efficiently. Well, the same thing with the backhand. If you are bracing into your leg, but your back foot is dragging, you're applying the brakes while trying to accelerate in your throw. So you want to get that back foot up off the ground. Someone who does this really, really well is Kevin Jones. Now, I know Kevin throws with a little bit different style. He does a lot of, pretty much everything is a hyzer flip. He also has incredible power, but notice his back leg always comes off the ground. So if you want to work on something like that, pay attention to Kevin Jones. So that's the feet, surface level. We got into some detail there, but not talking about everything. The next thing are the hips. Now, I mentioned this already. You want them closed until the last second, and that's why having those toes pointed in is super helpful, because you're able to basically get those hips closed so that as you're engaging those hips and really coming into your brace, those hips don't open early. And so having those toes pointed in helps with that. Also, you want to think about this concept of gliding. Now, I've made a video about this, but really this whole concept of gliding is just going from your back foot, your back leg, into your brace in a smooth motion. We think about other sports where people glide, whether it's basketball, volleyball, baseball, even football. You have gliding, moving, shifting your weight, however you like to think about it, but basically moving your weight and your momentum to one foot. And that's what you want to do, but this is a sort of like a passive movement. You don't want to be like forcing your body into your brace, because then that completely defeats the purpose of having a smooth throw. The next thing I want to talk about is the arms in the backhand form. And this is where a lot of people kind of find themselves in trouble a little bit. So let's start. You have two arms when you're throwing. You got the throwing arm and you got the off arm. Let's start with the throwing arm. You want to keep this loose. Now, I am not like talking like super noodle loose to where it's kind of just your muscles aren't even engage a little bit. You want to be relaxed, but you want to be able to hold an athletic position with your arm. So you got to have some focus and tension in your arm, but it needs to be loose. And I hope that makes sense. Basically, think about it like you're going to shake someone's hand. You're not squeezing your arm as if you're like getting ready to punch them or something, but when you're going to shake, you have control and movement in your arm, but it's nice and loose. The other thing, do not pull your arm. If you ever hear me say like, oh, you're pulling the disc, or you're strong arming the disc, whatever it is, that means that your arm is doing the throwing motion. And this might be breaking some brains for people, especially if they're brand new to disc golf, but you actually don't throw with your arm, if that makes sense. There's a lot of other components to the disc golf backhand that is more than just your arm, and we've already talked about some of them. And so you actually don't like pull the disc actively with your arm. It looks like you are pulling the disc with your arm, but you're not actually physically, muscularly doing that. And now the other thing about this throwing arm is you want to extend. Now, you might hear some people say reaching back or reach, and I've even said reach. I've said reaching back before. I've also said reaching out before, reaching back, reaching out. But I've started using the term extend because I think it's a little bit more passive. You might also hear some people talk about coiling and uncoiling. It's this same idea that your arm is extending out, but you're not putting this force behind it. What you actually want to be doing in the disc golf backhand is stepping away from the disc. So your arm is extending out, but you're not pushing it. you're walking away from it, which is a really cool concept. And as you work on this kind of thing, you start to notice the difference. It's a lot more passive, and your arm gets into position. The other thing to keep in mind with that is that by extending it, you want the disc to still be in front of you, like in the sense of it's not directly behind you when you throw. You actually want it, 6 to 12 inches out in front of you so that it can stay on the line that you're going to throw it on. Because if it's directly behind you, that's going to be really hard to hit your line because you have to go through your body first, which would not work. Okay, so now the off arm. This is something that not a ton of people focus on. I think it's really important, and it can make or break what you're doing with your throwing arm. So the first thing is, when we talk about engaging hips in the backhand throw, you want to have that gliding movement we're talking about, that back foot coming off the ground. That's going to help you engage those hips more because there's nothing for your body to fall back on when that back foot is off the ground. With that, you want that off arm, and for me, that's my left hand, my left arm. You want that coming into your side, like getting that elbow coming down into your side, because that's going to help you initiate that back rotation that we're going to get to, and then also keeping with your hips. Think about a baseball swing. When you're swinging a baseball bat, your hips and your back arm on the bat are coming in and across your body at the same time. That's what we want to have here too. And what's going to happen is that movement is going to actually power the disc as it comes across your body. So that's why it looks like you're pulling with your throwing arm, but what's actually happening as your hips and your off arm come around like a pulley system, your front shoulder, your throwing arm starts to pull the disc through naturally, because that's how our bodies work. So it's a really cool concept, and it just takes practice. But think about a pulley. And you only pull one side, but both sides move. So you want to be having that left arm if you're throwing with your right hand, or your right arm if you're throwing with your left hand, to be kind of initiating that motion with your arm. And now I mentioned the back. Throwing with your back is part of the throw, but it's less about this idea of throwing with your back, which doesn't always make sense, and more about using your back to engage your shoulder hinge. So like as you're having that pulley come, you're going to be having your arm come across. Now don't think about throwing with like your deltoids. Don't think about throwing obviously with your elbow and your wrist. That's going to come naturally and kind of create this whip effect. Think about using your lats and basically your traps a little bit. Like you'll feel it there when you throw this way a lot, between your lats and your traps. You're going to basically have that, your back is kind of using your shoulder as a hinge to get the disc out of your hand. And so you're going to have kind of this like whip effect, or this whip sound, similar to what we hear with someone like Drew Gibson. And so that's kind of how you start to get that thing. The other thing is your back needs to have an athletic position. If you are perfectly pinched straight, that's not an athletic position. There are very few sports where you want to be perfectly straight. The only time you want to have this kind of posture where your back is completely straight is if you're a runner. Whether you're a tracker, for someone who ran track and field and cross country, I sure know how to mess up those words. So if you run cross country, if you run long distance, or you're a sprinter, whatever it is, your running form is a straight back. You want to have that. But in disc golf, you don't want a straight back on every throw. In fact, a straight back is normally going to cause you to throw with anhyzer. So what you actually want to do is assume an athletic position. So think about basketball players, volleyball players, softball, baseball. They have a rounded back. Football players, especially, even when they're sprinting. If you notice, you can tell who has like a track and field background in football and who doesn't. Because when some players get into an open space and they're running towards the end zone, you'll see them straighten their back out a lot more, whereas others will stay kind of hunched over, because that's a football running position. It's that athletic position to make quick movements. And the disc golf backhand is all about making quick movements. And so it's super helpful to have this athletic position, this sort of rounded back, not bent over, but just rounded, because it helps your body stay nice and loose and athletic. But with that being said, you want a neutral spine. What I mean by this is that as you're engaging your hips, as you're bringing your off arm down into your side, and then eventually the disc is coming across your body, you don't want to be spinning and rotating and twisting your spine to throw. You're really not using your spine at all in this. You're going to keep it nice and straight because that means you're well balanced. And as the disc comes across your body, you're going to see it pass your eyes. And then eventually your follow through will cause you to turn and rotate and face where you threw the disc. So we want to have that nice neutral spine. That's how you remain in an athletic position. Now, speaking of watching the disc where it flies, let's talk about your head. You want to keep your eyes on the target until the very last second. You do not want to be turning away too soon because chances are you're not going to hit your line, you're not going to hit your target. You want to be looking until the last second, making sure you're all lined up. The other thing is that as you're looking at your target, eventually you have to look away at the very last second. But don't turn your head and look backwards because then you completely lose your sense of direction. You want to keep your eyes perpendicular. And so this is where I talk about trusting your peripherals. So you're going to have, for me, throwing right hand backhand, my right eye's peripheral is going to almost be keeping an eye on the target. And my left eye peripheral is going to be noticing that the disc is extended out from me as I'm stepping away from it. I'm trusting my peripherals, but I'm looking perpendicular to both the disc and the target. I'm not focused on either one of them for a split second. And that's going to keep that spine in that neutral position. That's going to help me stay in an athletic position. And basically, by not watching the disc, you're making sure that you don't end up rounding, which is a huge problem for disc golfers of pretty much all skill levels up to about, I would say, most advanced players aren't struggling with rounding, and definitely pros aren't struggling with rounding. There's actually some arguments out there. I've heard Paul Ulibarri talk about this, that you need to round in order to throw the Anheuser, which is a very interesting concept, but that's definitely another topic for another video. And then now the next, with the head, it's like, okay, so it's coming across. I need to be watching as it comes out of my hand. Not necessarily. When you're throwing, your eyes, let the disc pass in front of you. Allow your follow through your back shoulder. Allow that to kind of move your head, almost as if it's like going to hit you in the chin. Not obviously that close, but you get the idea, the fact that as that shoulder comes in, you're naturally going to start looking at where you threw. You don't want to look early because looking early can cause you to pull on the disc, which is not what we want to do. It can also cause you to open your hips up early. And so we want to keep that spine neutral, and we want to allow the disc to pass in front of our eyes. So that's basically a high overview, and even that high overview had a lot of detail in that. And so I hope that helped and kind of gave you a really good understanding of what exactly happens in the disc golf backhand. As you can tell, there's a lot that goes into it, but with practice, with patience, and just continuing to do the little things right, you will have good success throwing the backhand, and I think you're going to get really good results from following these tips. Now let's go ahead and let's transition to talking about my disc golf story. This is episode 1, so there's a couple of things that I wanted to share that I thought were just really cool things, but I wanted to also give you some tips with the backhand. But my disc golf story, I know I've shared pieces of it over the last 3.5 years, whether on Instagram or YouTube, but I haven't I don't think I've actually told the whole thing. So I just want to spend a few minutes going over this. So I first played disc golf when I was in college, but I only played, I think, 2 times that I can think of. And the thing is, in college, I played a lot of Ultimate Frisbee, and I love Ultimate Frisbee, still do to this day, even though I haven't played in years. But the thing is, I love Ultimate Frisbee. It's a lot of fun. There were always people playing at the school I went to. We always had Wednesday night Ultimate Frisbee. And it was just one of those things where that's what I did. And when I went and played disc golf, it was obviously very different from Ultimate Frisbee. Everything felt so weird to hold, and I couldn't throw very well because it's different than playing Ultimate Frisbee. So I hated it. I thought disc golf was so dumb. I'm like, no, I'm just going to go play Ultimate. I don't enjoy this. Not fun. I graduate college in Florida and I move back home to New Jersey. And I'm looking for Ultimate Frisbee clubs and there's nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm like, well, this sucks. I'm like, okay, I guess I can't really play. I didn't want to go into New York City and play because that would be a big round trip for me to do just to go play Ultimate. Couldn't find anything nearby local, so whatever. I decided to not do anything. I didn't even think about disc golf. I couldn't even think about it. And so I just am working and all that. And then I moved to Texas. So I was dating my now wife at that time and she was in Texas. And so I decided to move down to be closer to her. And I remember in the town that she lived in and I was moving in with some roommates, I saw some baskets. I'm like, disc golf. There's a disc golf course here. I haven't been able to play disc golf in years. I've never saw a course in New Jersey. Side note, there are some amazing courses in New Jersey that I've played since discovering disc golf. But at the time in Texas, I was playing. I had never, hadn't played in years. I was like, oh, that'd be pretty interesting. And then my wife said, oh, Matt, who you guys have seen on the YouTube channel, he plays disc golf, and I could, let him know that you're interested. So that's also how Matt and I became friends, and really, really good friends. And basically, so that was in March 2018. I moved in January 2018 to Texas. By March, I was already playing disc golf, and I was hooked from the very beginning. It was so much fun. I was so bad, but it was still so much fun to play. Matt helped me a lot, gave me some pointers, not so much about form, but about discs and everything, and just, helping me here or there with the backhand, with the forehand, giving me encouragement. It was just a lot of fun. And there was a course less than 10 minutes from me. And so it was super easy to be able to just go after work or go on a day off and play disc golf 2-3 rounds. And I started finding more courses around me. That's when I discovered U-Disc. I was like, this thing is awesome. 5 years ago, U-Disc was so different than it is now. But yeah, so March 2018, I started playing. Had a blast. My first discs, come to think of it, it was a Prime Dynamic Disc Escape for a driver, a Prime, no, those were the first discs I bought, outside a starter pack, a Prime Escape and a Prime Truth. But my first discs were an Innova starter pack with a 150 gram AVR, a low 160s, I think, maybe even in the 150s, but it was a DX Leopard, and a Shark, an Innova Shark. Those 3 discs, I still have the Innova AVR. I don't have the Leopard, gave it to a buddy of mine, Hitesh. You guys have also seen him on the channel. And the Shark, I think I gave to him as well. And man, that was so much fun throwing those discs. I really, really enjoyed them. And they really helped me play. And then I got some other ones, and, needless to say, I've been hooked for 5 years. Well, now let's fast forward a year and a half to September 2019. I'm on YouTube and I'm realizing there's a lot of old disc golf videos. There's not a lot of new current stuff. And I'm like, I was a teacher at the time. I wanted to be a teacher for a long time. I love teaching people things. And so I was like, I've never made videos before, but let me try this YouTube thing. Who knows? It could become something one day, right? So September 2019, I've only been playing for a year and a half. I know I'm not super great, but the thing is, I love disc golf. And I've already taught friends and family. They've played with me. Even if they didn't get hooked on it the same way I did, I've taken them out to the course. We've played, we've hung out. So I had already been doing this. I was like, let me do it. Let me give it a shot on YouTube. Who knows what it's going to become? And so September 2019, doing that. And obviously everything, one of my lights just went out. So everything coming from there, it is just wild to think about how much has changed in those 3.5 years. Still making content regularly, changing the format now, but just been really, really exciting. And it's just crazy. I have had so many discs. Like, I want more, and my wife does not want me to get any more. So it's, you know, dealing kind of with that. But a lot has changed. I have sponsorships now because of the channel and just, teaching people. And it's just been awesome. And that's really my disc golf story. I've been playing for 5 years, which is really hard to believe. And it's been a blast. I still love disc golf. I don't just still love disc golf. I love disc golf more than when I started. It is just so fun. I play by myself like 95% of the time. And it is just so nice to go out, especially after a stressful day or a stressful week. And I'm out on the weekends and just playing. And it's just so much fun. I really, really love it. Okay, before I get into the Las Vegas challenge, I'm going to go ahead and pause here because I'm going to get this light charged up and then we'll continue. Alrighty, we are back. I got the battery pack charging it and it's now working now. So, all right, so that's my disc golf story. And I hope that kind of, maybe gives you guys some insight as to how I found the sport, obviously, but also why I enjoy it and kind of why I started doing this whole thing. Just really, really, I really have fun playing disc golf. I really enjoy it. It's giving me the opportunity to, as I've traveled the country, to go and play some courses and just really enjoy some different things out there and just meeting people. I've met several fans of Gladiator Disc Golf while playing courses. I've played rounds with you guys. It's just been really, really cool. But that's not it for this episode. I want to go ahead and do a little wrap up of the Las Vegas challenge. So let's go ahead and let's start with the FPO side of things. I'll kind of share my thoughts a little bit and then we'll wrap it up with basically the top 10 finish. Okay, really quickly through FPO. After round 2, honestly, FPO wasn't all that exciting at the Las Vegas challenge. Kat was really, really good. Katrina Allen dominated the tournament. I know she did not play super well round 4. She shot even, but she still won by 4 strokes. I mean, she could have shot 3 over and still won. So, a couple thoughts about, the fact that she didn't play all that well in round 4. I think some fatigue. I think a 4-round tournament to start the year is quite a bit. Even though it's over 4 days, I mean, playing on tour is different than just playing casual rounds like these pros do multiple times a week. There's the competition, there's the focus, very different than a casual round. So I was shocked when I saw that it was going to be 4 rounds. I think that's a little bit too much for the first tournament of the year, but that's just my opinion. Missy made it a lot closer in the end. She is not known as a bomber. She doesn't throw super, super far. She throws far, but she's not a big distance FPO player. But the thing about Missy Gannon is that she just plays so clean and consistent. And she's just really good at the small things. She doesn't make a lot of mistakes. She's a really good putter as well. And so that's just going to help you, whether you're MPO or FPO, putting well will always help. So that's basically all the good things, more or less about the FPO side. There were 2 players that I think could, with Kristen Tatar, could probably dominate most of the American players, to be completely honest. Yes, Paige Pierce, Kristen Tatar were not at the Las Vegas Challenge. I think it would have been a little bit more competitive if they were there competing against Katrina Allen as well. But that's not even what I'm talking about here. Henna Blomroos and Evelina Salonen, some of the best players in the FPO field. They still compete even though they cannot putt to save their lives. And I know that kind of sounds harsh, but I'm pretty sure Evelina in one round or like other previous tournaments have like 27% C1X, 30% C1X. That's not going to get it done in FPO. she can throw so far. She can throw, her and Henna Blomroos can throw with such accuracy so far. But the thing is, if you can't putt, if you can't make it where it's most important, that's going to really hurt your game. And so that's something that they're continuing to work on. Now, to be fair, and I was listening to Joe Mez's coverage, so the two hot geese, Madison Walker and Erica Stinchcomb, they mentioned this. But Evelina said that her putting at the Las Vegas Challenge was the first time she had putted outdoors in 3 or 4 months. So that obviously has an effect on your putting, because it was also really, really windy and several of the days were cold. But the thing is, she was also having this struggle last year, and so was Henna at the end of the year. So that was a little disappointing, but I do think that they are such talented women and so good at disc golf that they will figure it out. They have to figure it out in order to compete. But that's basically the FPO. Now, the top 10 finish, we'll go ahead and we'll get to that. In first place, we had Katrina Allen at -20 for the weekend. Then second place was Missy Gannon at -16. Holland Hanley in third place at -15. And fourth, tied for fourth, you had Henna Blomroos and Ella Hansen at -13. So just keep in mind there, Henna was 7 strokes away from the lead, but definitely missed enough putts to, if not tie Katrina Allen, beat her. Like, it was that rough. So anyway, Henna tied for fourth with all those missed putts. Haley King 6th at -9. Jessica Weiss 7th at -7. Owen Scoggins 8th place at -5. Jennifer Allen and Caroline Henderson tied for 9th at -4. Guys, Caroline Henderson is a young talent, up and coming. She's touring for the first time. She is from Texas, specifically North Dallas, which is where I moved from when I came here to Franklin, Tennessee. She is a really good player. Her first Pro Tour event, as far as I'm aware, she shot -4. Las Vegas Challenge, in that weather, in that wind. She made some noise that weekend. So good for her. Super excited to see how she performs this season on the rest of the tour. Now for the MPO. This was such a good battle. I don't know if you looked at the final scores, but there were 7 golfers within 5 strokes when all was said and done, which is incredibly close competition. Calvin, in case you didn't know, won. Okay, Calvin won, but he just proved why he's so elite for a couple reasons. He didn't make a lot of mistakes when he played. He made smart decisions, but most importantly, he capitalized on opportunities. Calvin birdied on the back 9 of round 4. He birdied holes that very, very few MPO players have birdied the entire weekend. Like, some holes had single-digit birdies, I think, throughout the entire weekend, or at least the previous round. And so that is incredible. He proved why he's elite. He proved why you could argue he's top 3, but definitely top 5 in the world right now. Now, here's what I have to say about Kevin Jones, because he and Anthony Barella were like 1 and 2 going into round 4. We'll get to AB in just a second. But Kevin Jones, Jeremy Coleman mentioned this as well on Joe Mez. Kevin Jones didn't lose the LVC. He didn't lose the Las Vegas Challenge. Calvin just beat him. And I know it's like, well, he still lost, so what does it matter? I get that. But think about this. He had a clean back 9. When players like AB and everyone were taking bogeys, trying to do crazy things, Kevin Jones played a clean back 9. He could have maybe, played a little bit better, obviously get at least 1 birdie to pretty much tie it up, or at least to win. But he played a clean back 9. He, in a sense, did what he had to do to secure his position on the podium, but it wasn't enough to secure his victory in the event. Calvin birdied holes that most MPO players weren't coming close to birdieing. He played really well that last stretch. And you can't really fault Kevin Jones for that. Now, if you want to talk about as a body of work, Kevin Jones does have a little bit of a history with choking in the back nine or the final round. We saw it not last year because he wasn't really in the running for any major events last year. But the year before, I remember, I think it might have been Portland Open. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember when the basket was kind of on this like little hill, this little mound, and he like 3 or 4 putted from inside the circle. Total collapse. So Kevin Jones, although he didn't lose this, he does have a history of not being able to close out some of these events. Now, that being said, I think a lot of people were shocked by who kind of filled out the top 10. Ezra shocked everyone. He placed, let me get this pulled up. Ezra finished, I thought it was third. Oh, no, tied for second. Ezra Aderhold tied for second. So all I'll say to that is it's an open course. And Ezra has a lot of power, is really good in the wind. It was an open course, though. I'm not putting too much stock in his performance. I'm super happy for him. I think he's a great player, but I'm not going to put too much stock in someone being able to compete in every single event this year when it was an open course. Yes, the wind and the cold were there, but it played to his strengths. The course played to his strengths. Now, if he starts doing this on wooded courses, then we can start talking about all that. But overall, Ezra shocked everyone, placing tied for second, but I'm not putting too much stock in that personally. One thing that really surprised me, given the fact that Las Vegas Challenge typically favors those with big arms, and the wind was just crazy, so you had to have a really big arm on some holes if you want to get down the fairway. Matt Bell surprised me with an 8th place finish, and I don't know if you saw this, round 4, he shot a -12, which is absolutely insane. Now, Matt Bell, in case you're not familiar with that, with who he is not known for power, not known for distance. Matt Bell might be one of the few MPO players who can't throw 500 feet, which, is not a bad thing. Like, you don't need to be able to have a good score. You don't need to be able to throw that far. But when you're competing, like on the Disc Golf Pro Tour, it helps to throw that far. Well, Matt Bell makes his money with putting. He may not be the biggest arm out there, but he can putt. He's been putting world champion a couple times, I believe, but definitely at least once. He is very, very good at putting. And you don't shoot -12 unless you're good at putting. Not every putt is going to be a tap in. You have to make some awesome putts. So awesome, super happy for Matt Bell. He's currently sponsored, if I remember correctly, by TSA and maybe even Infinite with that. Kind of an open bag play going on right now. Now, I said this earlier that we'll get to him. Let's talk about Anthony Barela. Couple things. I'm not surprised that he performed well. First off, just like Ezra, a course like the courses like Wild Horse and the Innova course, they play to Anthony Barela's strengths, just like Ezra Aderhold. But Anthony has more touch than Ezra, in my opinion, and has better woods golf. But here's the thing. Anthony's been in college for the last 4 years, 3-4 years. He's a 1041 or a 1044 rated player, and he hasn't even been on tour for a full year. So he's young, hasn't been on tour all that long, and he already was competing for a win in his first tournament of the season. So I expect to see AB in these situations a lot. And I think some of these other MPO players who were, kind of competing last year and the year before, they're now going to start losing their spots to AB because he is just so stinking good. And he did this while throwing a completely brand new bag. Like, he switched officially to Discraft, I think like a month and a half ago. So obviously he's been throwing every day with them, getting comfortable. But to go from not touring not doing a full tour to then switching manufacturers, learning brand new lineups, and he threw Innova for a long time. There's a reason he was called Mini Macbeth. To now all of a sudden, like, almost winning the Las Vegas Challenge, like, that is huge. That is huge. So I'm super excited for Anthony Barela. The next tournament. That's the Las Vegas Challenge. Well, actually, I forgot to talk about MPO. So let's go through the MPO top 10 really quick. First place, Calvin Heimberg at minus 31. Tied for second, Ezra and KJ at minus 29. Kyle Klein and Drew Gibson tied for fourth at minus 28. Paul Macbeth solo sixth place at minus 27. So right there, 1 through 6 is only a 4-stroke difference. Then seventh place is Zach Arlinghaus at minus 26. Tied for 8th place, you have a 5-way tie with Matt Bell, Corey Ellis, Matty O, Emerson Keith, and Anthony Barella at minus 25. So you had the top 12 players within 6 strokes. Like I mentioned earlier, like the top 8 places, but that's because you had 5 people tied for 8th place. So you had like the top 10 or 12 players within 6 strokes of each other. If this is any indication of what this season is going to be, I am so excited about this. It's going to be awesome. Speaking of awesome, we have the Memorial at Fountain Hills this weekend as I'm recording this. By the time you hear this, will be a couple weeks past, but at the time of this recording, we are in preparation for the Memorial. Now, it's not a Disc Golf Pro Tour event. When I checked UDisc, there was no Grip 6 pick. But that's okay. I'm expecting, similar to the LVC, the big bombers to perform well here. I'm thinking guys like Drew Gibson, Anthony Barella, he plays this course all the time. And now that he's getting to go back after a really good performance at the Las Vegas Challenge, minus round 4 and that performance, I'm expecting big things from him. Eagle has already won an event this year, and he played pretty well at the Las Vegas Challenge. Well, didn't place in that top 10, but still played well for someone who's not throwing forehand and basically hasn't played a series of competitive tournaments in a row since I think like July or August. So I'm expecting Drew, AB Eagle, and Kyle Klein to perform well at the Memorial. I just think it suits their game. Drew has performed well in the past here. I don't know that he's won. I know he's come close a couple times. So it'd be cool to see him win. I also think it'd be really cool for Anthony Barella to win. I've always liked him. Obviously, Kyle getting another victory would be really cool. But those are kind of my 4 that I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing how they perform. So speaking of how people are going to perform this year, let's go and let's talk about the things I'm looking forward to most this season. I've already alluded to it with some of my picks, or kind of the discussion and my opinions about things. There is a lot of young talent this year that is stepping up big time. I don't think Paul and Ricky are going to win as easily as they once did. They didn't win as easily last year. Now, Ricky played really well in a lot of events and won a lot last year. But in things like the USDGC and Worlds, he wasn't there in the end to be competing for those titles where Paul was. And kind of building on something that Paul said last year. He basically said he doesn't focus as much on winning the smaller events. He's focused on the titles, which I get. I understand that. He's got 6 world titles. He's obviously a better disc golfer than me. Not arguing that. But I think with all the young talent that is coming up, I actually think he needs to kind of like buckle down a little bit and take these quote unquote smaller events more seriously if he's going to compete for Worlds and USDGC. Because if you have guys like Kyle Klein, Gannon Burr, who's also someone who can really play well at the Memorial, by the way, if he can figure out what he's doing with Prodigy and his bag. That's another discussion that we didn't even get into here. I'm waiting for more news on that to drop. But yeah, if Paul is going to compete, all this young talent coming up, getting super competitive, already placing on the podium, Paul can obviously turn it on to a next level, that McBeast mode. But I just think like that's relying on a lot. If you let some of these young guns get super hot tournament after tournament, when it comes time for those big ones, yeah, the pressure might get to them if they're competing for the title. But at the same time, they'll be on such a hot streak. I just think like Paul's going to have to win some of these smaller events. And obviously we're one event in. He placed a solo 6th. So he was there at the beginning of round 4 to compete. He didn't end up winning, obviously. But I do think that Paul is going to have to win some of these smaller events to kind of get in that rhythm for this season in particular, with just all the young talent that's coming and is hungry and wants to win. Calvin hasn't won a USDGC or a Worlds yet. Eagle hasn't won either of those yet. Anthony Barella, first year on tour. Kyle looking to do that. Gannon Burr looking to hopefully repeat, in his mind, repeat as USDGC, maybe even be probably the youngest world champion ever. So you have just those 5 young guys that are competing on tour full time, not in school. There's a lot of good. The future of disc golf is so bright. And also, I think the FPO is going to be even better than last year. Like, we saw the FPO last year really perform well, and it was super exciting. I think they're going to be even better this year. Obviously, we're going to have the top 3 with Kat and Paige and Kristen. Super excited about that. But like we saw last year, there's going to be times where you have some other players that's sort of like, if they're the S tier, the A tier, being like Ella, Missy, Henna, Evelina, they're not far behind. I'll say this, if Henna and Evelina find a putting stroke even in just one tournament, it's highly likely that they beat those other women by several strokes. They are just so good. They throw so accurately and powerfully. They just need to find the putts, and it's going to be dangerous for the FPO field if they do that. So I'm really excited about that. Well, that's basically everything I wanted to share with you guys here in episode 1. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want more content, join my Patreon. If you like the audio, if you like the video, go ahead and become a YouTube member. You'll get extra content there where I'll answer your questions. We'll play Disc Golf Valley together, and we'll hang out on Discord and on Patreon and YouTube. So there's a lot of time to talk and chit chat. So thank you so much for watching or listening. Get out there. Go teach someone how to play disc golf, and play some disc golf yourself and have fun. But most importantly, guys, have a great round.